Go.
Well, tonight we're in the the second part of a three-part series tonight, and then next Thursday is the third part. And we are talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls, what they say and what they mean. And tonight we're going to deal with the topic, what are some of the distinctive, even unique religious beliefs of the sect? Unique and distinctive within Judaism that just sets them apart. This sect lasted for as long as it lasted. It lasted until the year 68, when the Romans came and destroyed their center, and they had hidden their library in the caves that were in the cliffs above their center at Qumran. And after 68, we lose sight of the Essenes. And those that survived the Roman attack found other groups they could affiliate with, and where they could continue some of their religious beliefs. But if they became what was in the process of becoming mainstream Judaism, they would not feel very much at home. Now, the first set of beliefs I want to begin with, or I'll say something about water, by the way. If you think we have it bad, at Qumran, they got their water from the Wadi Qumran, which is a dry riverbed bed that only fills up if there's overspill of rain. And then they had a system of aqueducts, little aqueducts, not big Roman ones, that would feed water cisterns for when it wasn't available from the wadi. And you had to measure your water, and you had to treat it very preciously. So we're still better off than our forerunners at Qumran. Very distinctive in their belief system is a two-sided coin I'll call dualism and predestination. Dualism and predestination. Dualism. Under the influence of Persian religion, Zoroastrianism, and don't forget, after the destruction of the Babylonian Empire, Judea became a Persian colony called Yahud, and they were given autonomy and treated really very liberally, but it was an avenue for Persian ideas to start entering into early Judaism. Some stuck, some stayed, others died out. Well, under the influence of Persian religion, dualism speaks of two competing gods. Well, right off, there's a problem if you're going to be monotheists. The problem is two. That's one too many. Two competing gods, Ahura Mazda, who is the wise Lord, and Angra Mainyu, or Ahriman, who is the destructive spirit, and they are both functioning in the world simultaneously, and that explains very neatly why there's good in the world and why there's evil in the world. And they each have a vice president in charge of good, a vice president in charge of evil. Well, the Bible reacted to this, and you can see the reaction in the words of Isaiah. Of course, the prophet is committed to the idea of one God. And in Isaiah we read, God is claiming to be the fashioner of light and the creator of darkness, the maker of peace and well-being, and the creator of evil. I, says God, created, made all of these. I haven't got a partner. Good and evil. So important was this pronouncement as a polemic against the Persian dualism that to this day, this verse from Isaiah is an integral part of our prayers. Yotzer or uvorei choshech, speaking of God as fashioner of light and creator of darkness. Light representing the good and darkness representing the bad. And to this day we recite that affirmation that God created both. Speaking of this dualism answers another question, the origin of angels and demons. Angels are simply the army, the workmen, the servants of the good God, and the demons are the same for the evil God. Now, I'm going to read a few passages for you from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and before I do so, I want to let you know that you can read the Dead Sea Scrolls, all that have been published, in a very reliable English translation with a very fine introduction. And this is a Penguin Classics, and it's called The Complete Dead Sea Scrolls in English, translated and introduced by really a premier scholar of the scrolls from the beginning, Geza Vermes, V-E-R-M-E-S. Very easy to acquire this, Amazon, whatever. The Complete Dead Sea Scrolls in English. That's a very dangerous title if you're a publisher. You know, you publish it, it's out, it's being distributed, another scroll is found, it's not the complete. So you crush your fingers, you hope. Anyway, don't take my word for what's in the scrolls. You'll find them here in a literate English and with really admirable clarity and exactness. So you've got that. There are other translations of the Dead Sea Scrolls around, not on the same level. Okay. I want to say something before I give you some readings. The style of the sentences you're going to hear, nothing could be further from the style of the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible deals with short phrases, short sentences in the main. When you get to the Dead Sea Scrolls, the style is far more complex. You have these convoluted sentences that you'd never find in the Hebrew Bible. You could never confuse the Hebrew of the Dead Sea Scrolls with the Hebrew of the Hebrew Bible. It's just, and there's a reason. Look, the very end of the writing of the Hebrew Bible was around the year 200, give or take. 200 before the Common Era. The next datable Hebrew writing we have is in the Mishnah, the early part of the Talmud, and that's 200 of the Common Era. 200 and 200, 400. That's a 400-year gap when we don't know how Hebrew was written, how their style was, how even the grammar changes radically from biblical Hebrew, and we were completely unaware of the transition. We knew the Mishnah was different from the Hebrew Bible, but we didn't know the in-between steps. We didn't know how to fill the gap, and that's a very important function of the Dead Sea Scrolls for students of Hebrew language and literature. Here's our first paragraph. the expert. This comes from the rules of the community, where they give basically our basic doctrines. The expert, the maskil, and apparently he was a master teacher who instructed the members of the sect. The expert shall instruct all the children of light. And if you're not one of the children of light and you don't belong to the sect, you're not going to be instructed in this. You're getting very privileged information here. The expert shall instruct all the children of light and teach them of the origins of the nature of humankind. How come people are the way people are? According to the kind of spirit, ruach, the kind of spirit, I suppose we call it, according to their essential quality, their character, their spirit is what it's called in the scrolls. Before they ever existed, God established their whole design, and when, as ordained for them, they come into being, they will perform their deeds in accord with his glorious design without any change. You know, writes like that. We had a course in Greek where the final exam was on the Greek writer Thucydides. The subject was on one page. A page and a half later, you came to the verb. And then, this complex, convoluted sentence, before they ever is in accord with his glorious design without any change. Now, this is very difficult for biblical religion. If you are programmed to do nothing but good, righteous things, why should anybody reward you? You couldn't help yourself. And yet biblical religion is very much based on a system of rewards and punishments. And if you are programmed, your DNA, your computer program in you makes it impossible for you to do anything except bad, then who has the right to punish you? You couldn't help yourself. So the whole doctrine of rewards and punishments falls down, and with it a very central part of biblical religion. The rabbis were quick to respond to this kind of aberration of belief, aberration in terms of biblical religion. And so the rabbis came out with some very specific pronouncements. All is foreseen, but freedom to act is given. God knows everything you're going to do and everything that's going to be done. But we still have the freedom to pursue that path, be it good or bad, and we're not going to be stopped from being who we are. Even though God knows what we're going to do, all is foreseen. Hakol safui v'harashut nituna. All is foreseen, but freedom to act is given. And this seems to me a polemic against this dualism that was being entertained by some varieties of Judaism. They also said, the rabbis said, all is in the hands of heaven, meaning God. All is in the hands of God, except for the fear of God, except for piety. God determines everything, but not your religiosity, your piety, your devotion to God. God doesn't control that. And so this is the rabbi's response to this dualistic, aberration that was very much part of the Dead Sea sect. but died out when, after the destruction of the temple by the Romans in 70, and Judaism starts to crystallize as a distinctive movement, as Judaism becomes Judaism, dualism and predestination are out. All the children of righteousness, he created human beings. God created human beings and appointed for them two spirits, truth and wickedness, in which to walk until the time of God's accounting, which should be very soon. I understand the first sign is you run out of water. Until the time of the accounting. Truth's origins are from the place of light, and the origins of wickedness are from the well springs of darkness. All the children of righteousness, those who walk in the ways of light, are ruled by the Prince of Lights. Who is that? I would have thought God, but the Prince of Lights. We'll find out who the Prince of Lights was in a bit. All the children of wickedness, those who walk in the ways of darkness, are ruled by the Prince of Darkness, in accord with the mysteries of God. This word mysteries, it's the Hebrew word raz. That word is not in the Hebrew Bible. It came in the later part of the biblical period under Persian influence. It's a Persian word, pahlavi, raz. And raz means secret, which is what mystery means. Mystery, comes from the Greek mysterion, which means secret. Now, that's what the sect is into. We know things that you guys don't, and you're not going to know it till you go through the initiation and you conform to the discipline and the rules of this sect. Otherwise, you're not going to know the secrets. And in the mysteries of God's intelligence and in his glorious wisdom, God has appointed an end to wickedness, and at the fixed time of accounting, he will destroy it forever. Well, there are some secrets that I'd like to know to start off with. All evil's going to end at the time of the accounting. Well, why not sooner than later? Why doesn't God make the accounting come sooner than later? Indeed, why make wickedness part of the original design of existence? Why? Mysteries, this idea that there are secrets that the elect know, this theme comes into another early Jewish sect, one which became early Christianity. And so, in the epistle of Paul to the Corinthians, you are stewards of the mysteries of God. Stewards. You keep them, you preserve them, you know them, you don't let them out. You are stewards of the mysteries of God. And in the scrolls it tells us, in one of the poems, my eyes have gazed on things, on that which is eternal, on wisdom concealed from men. Secrets. And when you have a small sect and you want to attract members, the best way is to say, we can give you something that the others can't give you, because we know the mysteries of God and the mysteries of existence. Okay, predestination, New Testament, God chose us in him before the world began to be holy and blameless in his sight, chose us before the world began. In him we were chosen, for in the decree of God, who administers everything according to his will and counsel, we were predestined to praise his glory. Early Christianity was able to adapt and adopt this doctrine of the Dead Sea sect, which did not continue in what became mainstream Judaism. Now, it's one thing to say they have the doctrine. There's the light, there's the darkness. There are people who walk in the light, they always will. People who walk in the darkness, they always will, until God gets rid of the realm of darkness in God's own good time. But then comes a document that is unique with a capital U. A document we call the War of the Sons of Light against the Sons of Darkness. It's describing an apocalyptic battle that will take place at the end of time, at the time of God's reckoning. And that idea is in the New Testament, it's given the name Armageddon, which is the Hebrew Har Megiddo, a site where many famous political battles, military battles were fought, and that name is used to describe this battle to end all battles at the end of time. Well, that's a rather simple idea. There'll be a battle, and good will win. But that's not what you have in the war of the sons of light against the sons of darkness. You have the description of the elimination of the sons of darkness, of evil in the world, as a military defeat. There's really going to be a war. And so concretely did they believe this, that they described the march, the order of march of the troops of the Sons of Light, the members of the sect. They're carrying standards, like the Roman soldiers would have standards identifying their legion. They have it, and on these standards are written various biblical phrases. And of course, the main standard that Roman soldiers carried was, and you know it from all the movies you've seen, SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romani, the Senate and the people of Rome. The soldiers march for the Senate and the people of Rome. Well, the Sons of Light march with their standard that says, the people of God. They have their standards, they're inscribed, there is an order of march. My goodness, there's 7 lines of troops of 1,000 each. 700 cavalry on each side of them. There are 7 formations of infantry, leading up to 28,000. Where they got all these people, I don't know. But, yeah. Notice the 7s here. 7 lines of troops, 7 formations, 700 cavalry. It's an intentional, harken back to when Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho. In the description of Joshua fighting the Canaanites at Jericho, the number 7 recurs over and over again. The groups of priests, how many circuits around the city. And here they adopt that same 7 as the key number, as if to say, this is just another battle of the Lord, and it's going to end just as successfully as Joshua's battle did at Jericho. Now we have the words of the high priest rallying the troops. I mean, this is so specific. We're so far beyond light is going to fight darkness and vanquish it, and good is going to vanquish evil. Here we've got the battle plans. We've got the positions. Who's going to stand where? It's the tactics, the weapons. everything specified, written out. Incredible. You know who wrote the best translation and commentary on this document was Yigal Yadin, who was the preeminent Israeli archaeologist, but he was just the right guy to translate this text because he also was one of the chief generals of the Israeli army. And so he knew about Roman military history, and he knew about how you wage a war and how you win a war. It's really it's like nothing that exists anywhere else. The high priest rallies them. Today is God's appointed time to humiliate and abase the prince of the dominion of evil by the might of the princely angel of the kingdom of Michael. Now we know who that Prince of Light is. The princely angel of the kingdom of Michael. And in this battle, Michael will be exalted above all the divine beings. Michael is an archangel. But now, in this battle, he's like commander-in-chief, and his stock went way up. Now, this idea of Michael being the champion of the good, the light, this also finds its way into the New Testament. And in the New Testament apocalyptic battle, Armageddon, then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels battled against the dragon. Although the dragon and his angels fought back, they were overpowered and lost their place in heaven. The huge dragon, the ancient serpent, known as the devil or Satan, the seducer of the whole world, was driven out. He was hurled down to earth, and his angels with them. Interesting, in the book of Revelation, this battle takes place in heaven. In the war of the sons of light against the sons of darkness, it takes place right here on earth. Here's a very strange passage from this document of the war. O God, you engraved your gracious blessings and your covenant of peace, your alliance, for your elect. You engraved them with a living chisel to reign during all the periods of eternity and to muster the hosts of your elect in their thousands and myriads, together with your holy ones, your angels, that they may prevail in battle. Number one, the elect, even though there are huge numbers of them, are going to be joined side by side by the angels. In fact, there's a provision in the scroll. Be careful to keep yourself in a state of absolute ritual purity, because you're going to be standing next to angels. Well, who is this living chisel with which God engraved the divine blessings and the covenant, the alliance? I'm assuming it's Michael, this living chisel. I've never seen that phrase anywhere else, certainly not in the Hebrew Bible and not in any other Jewish document, but the living chisel. It's so typical of the scrolls that they're not going to tell you his name. They'll tell you he's the living chisel. When they talk about their villains, they'll tell you, oh, that's the spouter of lies. That's the wicked priest. That's the furious young lion. But they won't tell you their names. So we guess. And some of the guesses are good, and some of the guesses have proved awfully wrong. Okay, we have Michael. I'd like to talk a little bit about angels and demons. Wasn't that the name of that sequel to the Da Vinci Code, Angels and...
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, angelology and demonology as doctrines come into Judaism in the wake of Persian influences. They are not only adopted, they're adapted to biblical religion. Angel. Angel is simply the Greek word angelos. Angelos means nothing more than messenger. And the Hebrew word for angel, malach, is nothing other than the word for messenger. It could be a human messenger. It could be a divinely sent messenger. But it simply means one who is sent, period. No white nightie, no harp, no halo, and no little wings. Just a messenger. A human messenger, or a divinely sent messenger, or a quasi-divine being who serves as a messenger. And in the Bible, you see messengers, especially in the Torah, in the book of Genesis and the book of Judges, you have messengers who come and interact with human beings, and they're called malachim. They're called, translated, angels. But we don't know their names. We don't know anything about their personalities. We don't know how they look. They don't know the hierarchy of these angels. We don't know what are their individual functions. They're messengers, someone God sent, period. As we get into this gap between the end of the biblical period and the beginning of rabbinic literature, these doctrines become much more clarified. You can see it already in the apocryphal book of Tobit. I once gave a class here on some of the great stories that are in the books of the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha are books that came at the tail end of the biblical period, but they didn't make it into the Bible. They didn't make it. And some of the great literature, great stories, very interesting ideas. And in the book of Tobit, we read of an angel called, and now we learn his name, Raphael. And the meaning of his name in Hebrew tells us his function. He's a healing angel. He's in charge of healing and curing. So, in that 400-year gap between the end of the biblical period and the beginning of the rabbinic period, these ideas of angels and demons and their names and their hierarchy and their functions become part of Jewish folklore, more so than Jewish belief. Now, Michael, he's the powerful angel in eternal light, illuminating the covenant of Israel in joy. The dominion of Michael is exalted among the divine beings. He's called the Prince of Light. He's also called Melchizedek, which is the name of a very, very strange character that starts off life as simply being the king of Salem, who is a priest of God, the Supreme One. And he blesses Abraham in the story of Genesis, because Abraham helped defeat a coalition of foreign kings who came into Canaan, and he helped defeat them. And out of gratitude, Melchizedek, or Melchizedek in English, these names, when they're Hebrew and they come into English, sometimes I have no idea what they are until I think about it. I was sitting in an English literature class, and the professor's going on and on about this poem of Absalom and Achitophel. Absalom and Achitophel. Who is Achitophel? And so he's going on and on and on. About the middle of class, it dawns on me, and out of my mouth comes, "Oh, Achitophel." That's who Achitophel was. Well, Melchizedek is Melchizedek, and he develops from this role as just a king who blesses who says thank you to Abraham, into a kind of eternal presence, a priest forever, with a whole mythology develops around the character of Melchizedek and who he is and where he comes from, but he becomes equated. This figure of an eternal figure, Melchizedek, elevated, a favorite of God, becomes identified with the angel Michael. It's a much longer story, and I won't get into it. But in the war document, they talk about towers that are built on the field of battle. And they have 4 sides. And on each side, they're told you should hang a shield. And on each shield, you should write the name of an angel. The first one, Michael. The second one, Gabriel. The third, Sariel, or it varies with Uriel. And the fourth one, Refu'ah. And presumably these will protect the tower because you've got these angelic names attached to the tower. Well, that's very folkloric and very kind of almost mythological, almost magical. But I'll tell you, this didn't disappear from Judaism. When an observant Jew goes to bed at night, he recites what's called the bedtime Shema. The Hear, O Israel, God is one. But it's a special one, and it is only recited at bedtime. And I'll give you a line from it. In the name of the God of Israel, Michael is at my right, Gabriel is at my left, Uriel is in front, and Raphael is in back, and the presence of God is at my head. And you say it 3 times to make sure it works. And this protects you when you're sleeping. This is not formal Jewish belief. It is not obligatory belief as part of Judaism. It's Jewish folklore. But it's folklore that has survived from the scroll with the 4 angels guarding the tower, with their names guarding the tower, from the document, the War of the Sons of Light against the Sons of Darkness. What about men and angels? It's an idea of the sect that the elect, the chosen, as they rise higher and higher in piety and righteousness, they will inherit the lot of the holy ones. He has joined their assembly to the sons of heaven. In other words, people become angels through their behavior. Again, this is not normative Judaism. This is the belief of the sect in this directing. But I'll tell you, quick to pick this up were the early Christians who have great affinities to the Dead Sea sect. Colossians, Paul's epistle to the Colossians, giving thanks unto the Father, which made us appropriate to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in the light. We partake of the inheritance of the holy ones in the light, aka angels. Now, let's talk about a name I've used several times, Belial. Most of us know the name Satan, but in the Bible, this demonic figure is not really a demonic figure, and he's not named Satan. He's called the Satan. And the Satan in the book of Job, for example, is God's foil, His Majesty's loyal opposition. God says X, thus Satan will say, but what about Y? There's one in every crowd. All right. Well, this was the role of the Satan. And the Satan also became the one who would try to turn God against humankind. And so he would tell all sorts of tales about us to God, so God would punish us. This is mythology, Jewish mythology. And the Satan would do this. He was the accusing angel, which is why we get the word devil from diabolos. And diabolos, in the Greek root of it, means to hurl the accusation, the prosecution, the prosecuting angel. So this lore will change. And thus Satan, in the post-biblical period, becomes Satan with a capital S, and becomes Diabolos, becomes Beelzebub, becomes Belial. Now, the Dead Sea sect favored using the term Belial, or Beliar once, and the name does appear, in addition to Satan, in the New Testament as well. What's its history? Belial simply means a worthless, useless lowlife. Belial, a human being. The sons of the high priest Eli were not very admirable, and certainly didn't take care after their father, and they were called sons of Belial, sons of uselessness, of no goodness. Now Belial becomes capital B Belial during this post-biblical period, and it becomes a name for what we would call the devil, Satan, whatever. And that is interesting, because the Dead Sea sect didn't want to use the word Satan. Tribe avoided it most of the time and used Belial. Why? Because the Satan in the Bible is just a mouthpiece, has no power, can't do anything, is not an independent power of God. Anything that thus Satan does, he first has to ask God's permission. That's not our ideal of the devil. So this weaker demonic force was substituted. They didn't want to use the word Satan as often as they wanted to use Belial, the personification of the lowest of the low. How do they say it's so low you can't get under it? Like that. The demons during this period between the Bible and the beginning of Rabbinic Judaism, they also multiply, are given different names, different functions. In the Dead Sea sect, they're called the angels of destruction. But there are angels who wait on God, there are angels who praise God, there are angels with different functions in, once again, Jewish folklore. When we sing of a Shabbos evening, Shalom Aleichem, we're saying, greetings, Malachi Hasharet, angels who wait upon God. In other words, the function of these angels and similarly demons become more specific and are defined and become a whole lore unto themselves, which I hasten to add is not part of obligatory belief or creed in Judaism. They're ideas, if they appeal to you, like folklore, but they are not de rigueur, they are not something that are the formal creed of Judaism. In fact, Judaism has very little in the way of creed. It's a religion of deed, not creed. You don't get into trouble in Judaism by what you believe or don't believe. That's not going to do it. It's what you do or you don't do. It's deed, not creed. And in Christianity, which is very under the influence of Greek culture, creed becomes very important. A set of beliefs that must be followed in order to qualify. That is not what Judaism became. Interesting how the Dead Sea sect is a dead end in the history of Jewish belief. It ends with the sect, and any survivals of it in terminology, in ideas, beliefs, that you see more in the New Testament than you see in any Jewish document in the post-biblical period. Now, why have this sect at all? Why have the Essenes, these children of light, these elect? What is their purpose? A very distinct purpose. And once again, something that has echoes later on. In the Torah, atonement is made for Israel by the high priest in the temple in Jerusalem. But the sect views the high priest in Jerusalem, in the temple, as bogus, because he's not a descendant of the families of Aaron. He got that title as part of a military victory that the Hasmoneans won over the Syrian Greeks, and he became Jonathan, part of the same family as Judah Maccabee. Jonathan was awarded with the title king and decided that's not quite enough. He wanted to be high priest. The high priest, the religious establishment, went crazy. You can't just become a high priest. There were rules. You have to descend from the families of Aaron, and ever since the time of King David, specifically the branch of those families from deriving from Tzadok. The line of Tzadok is the legitimate line of priests. So how can this bogus high priest occupying this position in Jerusalem atone for the land? Someone has to do it. And so atonement now can only be made by, guess who? The sect, the chosen, the Essenes, whose leadership is descended from the true and only legitimate priestly family, the line of Tzadok. Now, what does this mean? The high priest used to perform a ritual sacrifice. And that was part of a whole ritual, the vestiges of which we see in our Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, but there are only vestiges of what actually was done by the high priest to effect atonement for the people. Now it's the community, the Yachad, the sect. The community will be a holy dwelling for Aaron, a holy dwelling for the priesthood. What was the holy dwelling for the priesthood? The temple in Jerusalem, now invalidated according to the sect. The whole community is the temple. and the community offers up the pleasing aroma. What is the pleasing aroma? The reach nichoach. The pleasing aroma is the aroma of the animal sacrifices on the altar that are being burnt up. I don't mean to be blasphemous, but it's like that marvelous smell you smell at a barbecue when the meat is being grilled, right? Well, there's not going to be sacrifices at the temple performed by this bogus priest. But the community, by living its life the way, according to its rules, they are the pleasing aroma. They are the pleasing aroma of sacrifices to God. The elect of God's goodwill shall atone for the land. This is called vicarious atonement. Whatever each individual does to atone for their sins, there is a vicarious atonement performed once by the high priest in Jerusalem, but now by the sect, as a community, as a whole. The members of the community shall atone for the guilt of rebelling against God and for the sins of unfaithfulness, and will bring about divine favor for the land. And here's the key word: without the flesh of burnt offerings or the burning fat of animal sacrifices. Without. You don't need that anymore. You just need us doing our things. Okay? The lawful offering of one's lips. Offering. What we offer God through our lips, namely prayer, will be as the sacrificial aroma. And righteousness, ethical perfection, perfection of way, perfection in how you lead your life in the sect according to their rules, will be as an acceptable free will offering. Now, this is an interesting precedent. The sect doesn't want to consider the temple in Jerusalem and the high priest there as doing the atonement, helping with the atonement process for the people. So you have to find a substitute. And the substitute, the sect chose itself. The rabbis, after the year 70, were faced with a similar predicament. It's not that they disagreed with the temple, it's that the Romans destroyed the temple. There was no altar to offer animal sacrifices on. And so different rabbis speculated on what can we do to effect atonement before God that will substitute, that will be in place of, in lieu of the animal sacrifices. One idea they came up with, which is operative today, study of the rules of the sacrifice. God says if you study all the particulars and all the minutiae of the sacrifices as they were performed when the temple stood, that will be considered, says God, as the equivalent of having made those offerings on an altar. They will suffice. A different approach was taken by another rabbi. Again, these are opinions. These are not obligatory beliefs. These are rabbinic opinions. And one came up with, what is the substitute for the sacrifices leading to atonement? Acts of loving kindness. Acts of chesed, of loving kindness. And he based his opinion on the prophet Hosea. Chesed, loving kindness, I desire, says God, not sacrificial offerings. And based on that first, acts of loving kindness. This idea of vicarious atonement carries on in the New Testament. In the New Testament epistle to the Hebrews, Jesus is said to replace the Aaronic high priest as, quote, a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek, this incredibly complex figure. Jesus' sacrificial death replaces the sacrificial offerings once made in the temple. And by being a priest, Jesus being a priest, not by being descended from a family of Aaron, but can still be a priest because he's a priest of the line of Melchizedek, which again is a very, very confusing, complex image. But Melchizedek is equated in no uncertain terms in the Dead Sea Scrolls with Michael, Prince of Light. And Michael, Prince of Light, frees the people, quote, frees them of the burden of all their sins, and, quote, carries out judgments of God's vengeance, punishment. In other words, it is not difficult to see that the idea that Jesus' sacrifice is in lieu of what took place in the temple of old. That Christian doctrine was anticipated in the thought and writings of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the image, the persona of Jesus, develops from teacher, healer, develops into following this prototype of Michael, Prince of Light. Michael, Melchizedek, becomes the kind of prototype of the persona of Jesus. In early Christianity, Jesus was not considered divine, was considered an inspired teacher and a healer. And over time, Jesus became, and there's a marvelous book by a New Testament scholar, Bart Ehrman, a very fine scholar, who wrote a book called How Jesus Became God. You could see the beginning of the process in the Gospel of John, not in the other three Gospels. This idea that Jesus is not just messianic, but is part of the Godhead, is God. This developed slowly in Christianity, but some of the seeds of that belief of Jesus being able to do vicarious atonement and of Jesus being able to remove the burden of sins, there were precedents and prototypes for this belief. They didn't come out of nowhere. In this Jewish sect called the Essenes, left their writings in the Dead Sea Scrolls, really were a dead end in the terms of the development of Judaism, but took on new life in the development of early Christianity. Thank you, and if you have questions, I'd be delighted to. And last time, by the way, your questions were superb, and I only hope my answers matched them, that your questions were excellent, and I thank you for them. And I've been told by our resident cybernetic genius that there are, Doreen, by no other name, she's taking questions from people out there in TV land who are going to send their questions through this little wire into her little telephone, and they're going to reach us.
I just asked. I haven't gotten any responses yet.
You haven't got any responses?
Not yet, no.
Even the thought that you could do it amazes me. Any questions on what we've talked about today? And it's a lot, I know, it's a lot. But it's the subject was the unique and distinctive religious beliefs of the sect some of which survived in Judaism, most of which did not. Okay, yes, please.
So you're saying that Catholicism believes in the Dead Sea Scrolls?
I'm sorry, I can't
Do
hear
the
you.
Catholics believe in the Dead Sea Scrolls?
You will have to ask Catholics. Let me tell you, the original committee, except for the scrolls that were bought by the Hebrew University and published very quickly by Hebrew University scholars, the scroll fragments that had to be put together and the documents that had to be reconstructed were supervised by a committee, most of whom were Catholic priests. None of whom were Jewish, and God forbid Israeli. The Jordanian government saw to that, and so did the rest of them. There were no Israelis, there were no Jews on the original committee dealing with the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were almost all Catholic priests.
Why?
Roland DeVoe, Milik, they were all Catholic priests. Somehow, and that gave rise, unfoundedly, to all sorts of suspicions. Well, because they're Catholic priests, maybe they won't tell us everything that's really in the scrolls and that they're suppressing things. Well, read it for yourselves. It's here. Nobody suppressed anything. Okay. What individual Catholics believe is a matter of their conscience, but certainly the church was directly involved in the original editing and putting together and publishing of the scrolls.
Why?
So they couldn't have been that much against it, could they?
Why? Why were the Catholics the ones?
Because somebody had to do it, and the Arab governments were not going to have Jews publish documents that showed Jewish presence in the land of Israel before the Holocaust. That's why.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Next. Yes, sir.
It says in there that Esther was not mentioned in these scrolls.
Who is it?
Esther?
Esther.
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 Oh, yes, there are copies of all the biblical books in the library of the Essenes, the sect.
Yeah.
But so far, a copy of Esther, even a fragment, hasn't turned up. And it's been 70 years. If it were there, it should have turned up by now. The book of Esther, how shall I say? It's great for brothers and Hamantaschen, but it has a lot in it that I could see would be objectionable to some Jews. To me, I like Hamantaschen, but I'm not crazy about the book of Esther. I think it doesn't represent the best of ancient Israel by a long shot. It's there. We read it every Purim. We don't hide our dirty laundry, if you will. But is it the noblest document of the Hebrew Bible? In my humble opinion, no. And I could see why the Essenes wouldn't be crazy about it either. In fact, there are among the Dead Sea Scrolls what they've named pseudo-Esther. There are documents that talk about Jews in Persia that sound a little like the book of Esther. In other words, there were substitutes that the Essenes read instead of reading the book of Esther. Because there were things there that just... A Jewish girl doesn't tell anybody she's Jewish. She goes into the harem of a Persian king and stays there until the right time. This is not the stuff of, Anyway, and all the massacring that goes on in the butchery, please, I applaud the Essenes for their discretion. Yes, sir.
How much of the expiration of the Essenes is due to the geographic separation from the population centers, as opposed to the fact that they were more rigorous in some ways?
Well, there were Essenes, members of the sect, who lived throughout the land of Israel. They weren't all at Qumran, because Qumran is a small settlement. We know how many buildings were there. It could only, I don't think it could accommodate more than 100 people, if that. And certainly the cisterns of water, when you think of how much water you need to support a population, you can see not too many people were going to be there. No, what led to their demise was, number one, the destruction of the center, the spiritual center at Qumran, and the fact that probably disillusioned the members of the sect so profoundly that they looked elsewhere for something else. And it was a time of many different Jewish sects, one of which were followers of Jesus. And they looked around, and there were others. And they looked around till they found something that accorded with the language of their scrolls and the beliefs of their scrolls. And maybe some didn't join anything and just disappeared out of complete disillusionment, crushed. We were going to win the battle against evil, and we were going to march with the angels. And hello, what happened? What went wrong? You can imagine the trauma of these true believers. So what happened to them is more a psychological question, I think, than a political or a geographical one.
Thank you.
About,
Yes. Okay. Let me start off. Yes.
If the Catholic,
I think you mean Christian.
no,
Chri-
did you say Catholic?
He did, and I correct it now.
No, not for sure.
Christianity is more than Catholicism.
No,
It's many sects.
right, okay, I see
Yes.
that,
Go ahead. I should have corrected it then,
but,
but go
I
ahead.
see, I
Yeah.
see.
Christians.
If the Christians, mostly or totally, gave us and presented the scrolls, then I feel there's a void. Am I right in so feeling? Because they're so significant, so important to us.
Eventually, the scholarly community looked at this closed shop of Catholic priests, and they were Catholic, and not only that, they parceled out. They didn't do all the work on the scrolls. They were a committee. You know about committees. Committees don't do anything. They tell other people to do things. The committee assigned to different scholars groups of scrolls and said, you are responsible for photographing them, for translating them, commenting on them, and make them available to other scholars. Well, it took 20 years before some of these scholars surrendered the documents that were assigned to them, not because they were trying to suppress anything, but because scholars have feet of clay. We have egos, we have weaknesses. You're a professor in a divinity school or a graduate school. You have exclusive right to these 10 documents. You are going to attract graduate students to your program because that's the only way they can work on those scrolls, because they were given an exclusive of documents that belong to world history. This is monstrous, and it took a while for people to say, enough! This is wrong! And little by little, Israeli scholars were invited. Other Jewish scholars were invited. You didn't have to be a Catholic priest. And the scholars who had received their little lot of documents were told, get moving. Move it or lose it. You sat 20 years on this. Come on already, we're waiting. It was a terrific scandal. But it wasn't a scandal in terms of anybody trying to suppress or anybody trying to hide the truth. No, it was human selfishness, inertia, laziness, and politics of when the scrolls were first found, where the museum, the Rockefeller Museum, which was in what was then Jordan, they weren't going to encourage disseminating these documents that showed the presence and activity and vibrant life of Jews in the Holy Land at the time of Jesus. They weren't interested in doing that. These are great documents, but great documents are still subject to fall into the hands of petty people. Yes, Paul.
Have all the fragments been examined and translated, or are there some that still have yet to be examined?
I'm sure there are, because they were in a state of disrepair where the writing was illegible, or there are only 2 letters on this little fragment. Is it from the book of Genesis? Is it from the Dead Sea sect's writings? Is it from the book of Jubilees? How do you know? So there are fragments that have yet to be identified. I must say, there's a famous picture of the early committee working on the scrolls and piecing them together in the museum, and the fragments were under glass, and they were trying to put them together like a jigsaw puzzle, and there is Father Milik with a cigarette dangling out of his mouth as he's working over the scroll fragments. People don't do that anymore. The scrolls are in humidified, humidity-controlled, temperature-controlled, very, very carefully preserved. Yes. But, you know, hindsight's a wonderful thing. What we knew about how to preserve Dead Sea Scrolls in the 40s, we know more now. And when they dropped the atom bomb in the Nevada desert, they had no idea of what radiation was and what radiation could do. So you can't judge then by now. Yeah? Yes, sir. Jorge.
Do you know any translation in Spanish about the...
Oh, yes.
Can you recommend one?
It's not in Spanish. It's written by 2 Spanish scholars and translated into English. But it's called the Study Edition of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I use it all the time. It's got the original text on the left and English translation on the right. And it's very handy because as you're reading, you can check the original, and there are 2 Spanish scholars whose names elude me right now. But yes, very much involved. And I have no doubt there are Spanish translations. My Spanish isn't good enough to need those translations, but there are. Yes?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
How many of them common understanding the good and the evil, the Satan aspects of all this? Did they take it the next step? Was there a hell in the afterlife that was considered as well as a heaven? I mean, did it go to that level as well?
Next week. Next week, I talk about the hereafter. And so stay tuned. Same channel. Yes. Do you have questions? No, you Okay, well, thank you very much, not only for your interest in coming, but coming on a night when you have no water. You know, you're brave souls. I applaud you.
Thank you Murray, so very much. I want to thank you all, but actually, I don't know how you could have resisted coming. It's fantastic. And next week, Thursday, 7 o'clock, I'm already on tenterhooks. I want to find out about the hereafter.
You shouldn't know from it.
As
120 years, you shouldn't know from such things.
just in case. So, but in the meantime, please come and join us for some coffee and sweets.